breaking down everyday workplace issues and diagnosing the hidden sickness, not just the obvious symptom. Our hosts, James and Kobe.
Did we lose a patient?
No, that's just my lunch.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Kobe, he's James, and let's get started by acknowledging we are in our fourth season. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that people are actually listening to us for now into our fourth year or starting our fourth year of the podcast. So that's pretty cool. So thank you for actually tracking with us. It's been a lot of fun creating this content. But not only are we in a new season, we also have some new branding thanks to our amazing partners at Cato Creative. Becky has outdone herself once again. So, anyways, check out the new podcast art. First of all, I'm in love with it. I think it's great. And then go check out catocreative.ca. They've done this work for us. We're really appreciative.
Oh, it's just so cool how we like met Becky and started working with Cato Creative because I mean like Becky was just a fan. Becky is the owner of Cato Creative and she was just a fan of this podcast and just like one day like randomly kind of reached out to us and we responded back and we started chatting with her and then and then we were like, hey, you got some cool skill sets that we don't have. Why don't we just kind of it'd be cool if we just pick your brain on stuff. And she's like, great, mind if I pick your brain on stuff? And then, kind of like fast forward, like, a year and a half later, and now we're like
Yeah.
partnering with her on this really cool initiative to support like corporate clients and stuff like that. Like it's awesome. And Becky is just the best.
Yeah. So thank you, Becky. So also a new season means we get to try some new stuff out. So what I'm really excited about for season 4 is that we're going to be a bit more intentional and focused with our podcast topics because we've gone broad on a lot of different topics, which has been great. It's given us a lot of really interesting pieces to talk about. But really, where we want to focus our efforts this year is on 3 kind of buckets. So you're going to hear episodes and content that's focused on strengthening workplace culture, developing leaders, and some practical psychology for the workplace. That's really going to be the theme for this year, and everything that we do, all of the questions that are asked, all of the content is really going to be focused on one or more of those 3 categories.
Yeah, so the episodes won't really seem any different. We're still going to start off with a question. We're still going to kind of try and dig into it and then provide some insight and then ideally some how do I fix this kind of pieces. That part's not going to change. It's really more that we've gone broad on a lot of topics because, like there's a lot of things that fall under the, kind of the umbrella of trying to figure out what's going on in your workplace. So we thought that having a little bit more focus would allow us to go a little bit
Yeah.
deeper and hopefully get some more practical ideas on solutions or a more richer understanding of kind of the underlying causes of some of these things. Um, so we really do hope that that this works for folks, but also we want to remind people that you can easily message us like right now. Like, if you're, provided you're not driving your car or go for a run or cleaning, you can text us right from the a link in the show notes and just be like, hey guys, what about this topic or how about this or those kinds of things too. That way, if these topics are and you want deeper on the 3 topics that you mentioned, the three buckets we're going to talk about throughout the season. Or if you're just like, well, this is maybe it doesn't fall into it, but what about this? I mean, we love the listener feedback. So again, we're bad about reminding people to um, to actually go in and like message us, like because you can easily do that right now. But it's something that we're hoping that this new structure, this new format will give us a chance to provide more practical pieces because we'll be more focused, like you said, or yeah, on strengthening culture, improving leaders, and making sure that we're giving you some psychological insights to kind of help you better understand the workplace and the people in it. So I'm pumped for this season. I think it's going to be great, especially with our shiny new branding and everything. So yeah, I'm excited.
All right, enough of a preamble. Let's
Okay.
jump in. So
All
I'm
right. So while
going
I ask
to
you, go ahead. I was just gonna say I'll ask the question. That's my thing. I ask the question. That's my job, right?
well then ask the question, sir.
So, all right. So here's the question. How do you create psychological safety in trauma-infused workplaces?
Yeah, so this is what's funny. This is a topic that we've actually been kicking around for a while. It's something that has come up time and time again in our work, in our conversations with partners, in our conversations with clients, existing, prospective.
Mhm.
I think we need to do a little bit of defining terms in a moment, but really to answer the question, which is, I know, a bit of a change for me. Um, how do you create psychological safety when there is just so much trauma that people have experienced, are experiencing? It's created this toxic environment. Really, what you need to do, there's a few things that you need to do, and it starts with identifying where these problems are, identifying the causes of whether it's toxic stress or institutional betrayal, whether it is existing like a lack of management and leadership skill that is causing, micromanagement, the deaths of leadership that we've talked about many times. Whatever is cause, the root cause needs to be identified. We need to understand what's happening, how it came about, and then we need to work to resolve it. And that mantra of identify, understand, and resolve really is going to play through everything that we do when we're talking about how do you create psychological safety in a workplace that just is rife with toxicity, trauma, stress, whatever label we want to put on it.
Yeah. The idea of what we mean by trauma infused is something that, it's not necessarily like a hard term that people might be expecting that it is. But what we mostly mean by it is that within like teams or within individuals, there is trauma that is blocking progress.
Mhm.
There is trauma that has created triggers for, behavior that's going to be unproductive. There's trauma that is chipping away at people's wellness, their mental health, their ability to bring their best selves to work. And a part of the idea is that this happens in a lot of our workplaces, and I think this has been accelerated since 2020.
Yeah.
I think that we all live with this a whole lot more now than maybe we did in 2019 and previous years. But this idea that often when you're hearing about like cultural improvements or this and that, there's almost like an expectation that everything is sunshine and roses. People are happy, people are content, no one's carrying underlying stress or mental health. And so these solutions we're going to provide you are based on that scenario, which is no workplaces
That's a
anymore.
fairy tale.
It is. And so it's important for us to be recognizing that we need to accept the fact that there is trauma infused in our people, infused in our teams, and infused in our workplaces. And that when we try and create a psychologically safe environment, we try and create, better interactions and kind of camaraderie with leaders and their teams and amongst coworkers, that we have to navigate that trauma. Now, that trauma could come from challenges caused by the workplace. The
Mhm.
trauma could come from a past employer that people had that that caused them triggers and has readjusted how what is normal for them, and they're bringing that to their new teams. It could become from kind of the nature of the work and how stressful the job could be and the everyday. So it's important when we're talking about identify, understand, and resolve. Identify where trauma is coming from, whether that's something that the organization does or whether that's something that person is bringing to the job separate from the workplace itself, from a past job or from their own baggage. But it's important for us to identify where the causes of trauma might be coming from if we're going to move forward with understand and resolve.
Well, and this is, I mean, it's to the heart of a lot of the work that we do, right? This podcast is called Diagnosing the Workplace. Our work really revolves around investigative diagnostic tools that help us to kind of get to these root causes. And where one of the big contributors that I've seen to institutional trauma, to just when there is significant restructuring or significant transition. So whether that we see it with mass layoffs, right? When a lot of people, when there's big layoffs notices, the people there, yes, it is hugely impactful and negative for those who lose their jobs. But those who survive that very traumatic experience also have effects from it that can create
Right.
institutional betrayal. This idea that the company, that the organization doesn't care about its employees, and really they're carrying that sense of betrayal forward. These are things that often aren't caused by any one particular event. It's usually a
Mhm.
culmination of events. And so, like, I can remember working with an organization that had gone through significant restructuring, right? They're part of there were a lot of sites, and there was a big effort many years ago to restructure how that entire organization was funded and supported and organized. And it included mass layoffs, it included a lot of really bad change management practices with no communication going to staff. So people started creating their own narratives of what was happening and why, and rumors started spreading, and like just absolute disaster. And it's been nearly 10 years since that restructuring, and people still reference that event as a major disruption, as that what we went through hell at that time, right? There are a lot of things that can contribute to this. And so if you're looking at trying to identify the issues, don't only look at what's happening in necessarily the last 6 months.
Right. Yeah. No, and you're right because I mean it's the kind of stuff that especially when we're talking about things like institutional betrayal, which I'll define in a second, but the idea of when any kind of betrayal can like almost like singe that experience in your mind and can be something that maybe a very long time to get over just because of how like
Yeah.
difficult the traumatic that experience can be. But
Well,
yeah,
look at
so
any relationship, though, right? Like
yeah.
any relationship that we have, whether it's a personal relationship, a professional relationship, employee employer
Mhm.
relationship, relationships have to work with some level of trust.
Yeah.
And when there's a feeling of betrayal in a relationship, regardless of the setting, that is incredibly difficult to come back from. It's not going to happen just by accident. You need to put some effort into acknowledging the wrongs that have happened and working
Mhm.
towards correcting that.
No, you're right. All right, so I'm just going to define institutional betrayal.
Right.
We referenced this in a previous episode, so I'll make sure I cite what that episode is if someone wants to learn more about that specifically. But institutional betrayal is refers to wrongdoing perpetrated by an institution upon an individual, a person that is dependent on that institution. So, like an employee employer. This includes failure to prevent or respond supportively to something that's happened to them by wrongdoing. It's the idea that it can absolutely kind of like cut their legs out from
Yeah.
underneath them and realize that they do feel a sense of absolute betrayal because this has been something that is supposed to be almost like a guaranteed safe point,
Yeah.
and they let them down. And I think that layoffs are a great example of that. And I think particularly how layoff is seen as institutional betrayal. It will probably change a little bit by generation, right?
Hmm.
So older generations that relied on expected that this employer is going to look out for me. I
If
can
I show
create loyalty and
loyalty and show up every day and work hard,
yeah,
then my loyalty will be rewarded. which
Yeah.
that we have seen that betrayal happen time and time again.
Yeah. Well, that relationship it doesn't really exist anymore,
No.
in the broader workforce. So older generations will hold on to that being a much larger institution of betrayal than say younger generations that grew up knowing that's not a thing. You never, so don't even plan for that. That that the nature of the work is you're going to be gone, at any point. So don't necessarily worry about setting up roots because they can lay you off for no reason, and that's just life now. So, there is, even the way that, one instances might actually be processed differently by different demographics too, right? So that's kind of the complexity of
Yeah.
institutional betrayal.
Well, and as big as institutional betrayal can be with like mass layoffs, it can also be in the regular interactions that you have between an employee and a manager, right? If
Hmm.
an employee is asking for support or feedback or help and they're being dismissed or they're being, especially like we've heard the firsthand accounts from as we've been doing, investigations in different areas of employees who feel like they've been thrown under the bus, right?
Yeah.
Or employees who, they try to share their ideas with the leadership, with managers, and then somebody, their manager takes their idea, takes credit for it, and runs with it, right? And gets the
Mhm.
credit. All of these
Right.
interactions that you have on a daily basis, when you as a leader or a manager, we've said many times before that your role, your primary responsibility is no longer to do the like the day-to-day the tasks that your employees, that your staff are doing. Your job really is to empower your team, to give them
Hmm.
what they need to be successful, to do the work. You're managing that performance. You're not necessarily doing all of the activities yourself. And when you aren't supporting your staff, when they feel like you become more of a hindrance than a
Hmm.
ally, or more of a hindrance than a support, it can cause the resentment. Then the resentment can turn into anger, and the anger can turn into feelings of betrayal. And these things build. They don't always
Yeah.
happen in like a mass layoff is a single event that can be incredibly traumatic. But institutional betrayal can
Yeah.
also come from the culmination of small things that it's the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, right? And
Yep.
as many
Yep.
times as I said
And
it,
I
I
think too,
need to say it again. Perception shapes
yeah.
reality. So you may
Right.
not agree that these things are happening, but if the perception of your staff is that this is how things have played out and you are not managing those expectations and that communication, then perception, what
Mm.
we see, what we feel, is the reality for us.
Yeah, no, and that is a really good point. And I think that is also kind of fair, kind of going back to what you said, that sometimes the institution isn't necessarily, like you say, the company. Sometimes the institution is almost like the role
Mm,
of like a leader or a manager, someone whose job it is to be almost like an institution for that. Someone that's supposed to be someone that you can trust, someone that's supposed to be your guide, someone that's supposed to protect you. And, so that idea of, that betrayal from that person who's an institution can be incredibly damaging, and like I say, it can be ongoing. Like one of the things we talked about in kind of, I think in an episode we talked about leadership at the end of last season. We were talking about the three deaths, and one of
mhm.
the things that I've seen a lot, because again, I've got a lot of experience working in trauma infused workplaces and trying to turn them around and create psychological safety, both from my past and, let's be honest, very recently I've been involved working with that. And one of the things that I see a lot is when those three deaths exist, and just to remind people, the three deaths are self preservation, self sabotage, and micromanagement. When those three things exist, especially self-preservation, one of the ways self-preservation looks is throwing people under the bus,
Yeah.
or it's pitting people against each other in order for your role to be clear. I'm the peacemaker here, but you're the peacemaker because you pitted people against each other and you caused this environment, this competitive, cutthroat environment, just so you had a role of being the peacemaker.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there are these types of things where sometimes again it's not like it's people are planning to create trauma, but it's often bad practices, things like self-preservation and self-sabotage and micromanagement and putting using humans as resources, not providing resources to humans. These are the things that tend to be the causes of a lot of institutional betrayal and a lot of trauma.
Hmm.
And sometimes that's again, people bring that in from past jobs. I know I've got people that have worked for me that they feel safe, with me, with their team, but they are so like programmed by their past bad experiences or their past bad employers that they're constantly trying to remind themselves, right? I don't have to be on guard with this. I don't have to be stressing about having this conversation because you're not going to rip my head off. You're gonna help me solve it. Figure
Well,
this out. We'll figure this out together, and that kind of stuff, right?
yeah, it's the feeling that even after you leave the environment that caused the trauma, you still feel the need to walk on eggshells, right?
Yeah,
To
right.
tiptoe around to like it's a emotional trigger and a response. And
Or
when
just
it
that's what normal is. It's normal to tiptoe around and to not be able to have a straight conversation with your boss, or to
right,
always be on your guard because that's just how work is. And that's something what times that what that trauma creates in us is it changes our set point for normal.
yeah. And I mean, this is why I even going back years and when I was doing more one-on-one business development and coaching with small businesses, I would hear things around, well, I just want somebody who, they need to leave their baggage at the door, right?
Mm.
What happens on their own time doesn't matter. When they come to work, everything else needs to be pushed aside, and I just want them to work. Yeah, of course, that's what you want. But we're talking about human beings, right? We are complex
Yeah.
creatures, and you cannot
Hmm.
separate a person from their experiences. And what
Right.
the experiences that somebody has had in the past shape their behaviors in the future. So
Hmm.
if you want to change those behaviors, you need to work with somebody to identify what the triggers were.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like there's a lot of complexity that can go into this, but creating like one thing that I think we need to say, and I don't, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably this isn't going to come to as a big shock to you, but it's worth it to actually make these changes from a
Hmm.
business perspective, from a management perspective, from an HR perspective, from a cost analysis, risk mitigation perspective, addressing
Hmm.
the realities of the workplace has a direct benefit to your productivity, to performance, to retention, to attraction, to your ability to grow and scale and reach new markets and expand. Like it affects everything. And you can't expect that people are going to just turn off parts of themselves and leave it behind, and it's never going to influence your workplace. It would be nice from a business perspective to never have to deal with these things. But if you are dealing with human beings, you are dealing with the mess that human beings bring with them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think that that's just the reality when we're talking about identify what is it that is the institution, whether that's the company or the leaders are doing to cause betrayal and to cause trauma.
Hmm.
What is stuff that people are bringing to work from past jobs? And what is stuff maybe that's influencing from them outside of work that is, again, causing the trauma and having triggers that you need to be aware of? Because, again, saying stop having trauma
Yeah.
doesn't work. So the best thing you can do is identify, okay, where are the sources? Where is it coming from? So you can know what is stuff that we need to fix, what is stuff that we need to help you sort out on your own, and what is stuff that maybe is more of a larger wellness support than actual, kind of like professional support and training, right? So knowing the where it comes from and identifying what it looks like and everything like that and what those triggers are, that's really the first step.
Yeah.
But I think that from there we can probably move on to talking more about the understand side.
Okay.
Because I mean, because again, like understand that, when people have this kind of trauma, when they have this kind of betrayal, when they kind of have these types of pieces that they're bringing to the workplace, it causes, it causes people to be burned out. It causes people to become jaded. It causes people to be always in like an attack mode or always coming out swinging whenever you kind of come to them. That's their default setting. Because largely, you have to understand that it's about them never feeling safe enough to be vulnerable or to not be on the attack or to not assume everything is an attack against them because that is just kind of what the outcome of living with kind of this ongoing trauma looks like. And when our workplaces are infused with it, that just becomes what is normal. That becomes the culture, and that becomes just how to expect it. But you have to understand that why people are that way is because they've been made that way.
Yeah.
When it's a one-off person on your team, that might be something that maybe is external that's been brought in from a past job. But when it's everybody, there's something that is being caused by that in the workplace.
We also need to understand that if we could even just snap our fingers and remove the event that is causing the trauma, let's assume that it's happening in the workplace currently, that
Mhm.
there's some trigger, there's some consistent event or series of events that is causing this this emotional toll, this toxicity. If we could snap our fingers and remove those events and just fix everything, and everything's now, there's no more traumatic events happening, we need to understand that the effects still
Mhm.
persist, right?
Right.
Removing, we need to address and mitigate and ideally remove these very traumatic events or these toxic event, whatever
Mhm.
is causing it. We need to resolve that. But just removing the event doesn't, by default, fix the effects that the event has had already.
Absolutely. Because the whole idea is that you're right, is that part of the thing about trauma is that it's that idea that that traumatic event has shaped you. It has burrowed into how your brain has been rewired, right? So it's something that is now, it is now part of your base set point. It's your default now.
Yeah.
It's like you've been conditioned into this. So like I said, by not understanding that, it's a matter of saying, well, it's like COVID's over, just stop being traumatized by it. Doesn't actually, do anything, right? I mean, so
Yeah, the event, I mean, let's be serious. The scariness,
mhm,
the big traumatic events related to COVID. Yes, it's still happening. People are still
mhm,
getting sick. Unfortunately, people are still dying from COVID. But
right.
the
The
big
new,
traumatic trigger or the big event is largely COVID's largely as a pandemic, as a this
the causing
crazy event that we
lockdown.
all went through. It's over.
Yeah,
It still exists. It's still around. Blah blah blah.
right.
Just because we are now in a quote unquote post COVID era
Mhm.
doesn't mean that the effects from it have magically gone away unless
Yeah,
we have taken specific steps to identify, understand, and then resolve what has happened, the
yeah.
effects that it is having on people.
Right, because I mean, like we had a client that, a year or so ago, their building caught on fire and burned down.
Yeah.
It caught on fire and was actually on fire while they were in the building,
Yeah.
right? A very scary, very traumatic
Very
event.
traumatic event.
And it's something that, like, but like what's great was the leader of the organization, the executive director, wasn't like, okay, everybody, the fire is over, get back to work. They were not like that. They were just, okay, we're going to be dealing with the side effects of this, the aftermath of this for a long time. So let's just accept that and realize that, this is going to be something that we're all going to carry for a while,
Yeah.
right? And that is the right attitude, is that that this stuff is going to cause, there's going to be triggers. You're going to have things like impacting your mental health. There's going to be, again, toxic stress is going to be something that's now going to be part of your normal.
And I think it's important to also understand that logic isn't your best tool when trying to address somebody who is experiencing trauma.
Hmm.
Trauma tends to be a very emotional response to previous events,
Right.
and you can't logic your way out of emotions. It
Right.
just doesn't work
Hmm.
at any if you've ever been in a relationship and you try to logic your way out of an emotional response with your partner, you know how badly it tends to go.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
But
No, you're
like
right.
we all make that mistake though, right? Like
Absolutely.
let's
Yeah.
like but these are just things to keep in mind as you kind
Mhm.
of go through, and nobody's going to get it right all of the time. We all are going to fall short of the standards that we set for ourselves.
Yeah.
But how we respond to that, how we react to that shows our character and our leadership capacity. And
Mm.
how we care for others and empower others shows the character of ourselves.
Right. So one of the things that I think I also want to kind of attach to the, like, in this section where we're trying to understand about kind of the trauma infused workplaces, everything like that too, is, again, often a big cause of trauma in workplaces. Again, beyond the institutional betrayal, where it's a matter of like the organization doing layoffs, it's often caused by individuals.
Mhm.
And toxic employees are one that is a massive, massive cause of trauma in workplaces. And again, I don't think we've gone into an organization that's been struggling, that we've identified there needs to be massive changes in order for this organization to become stable and sustainable, and not had to deal with the reality of toxic employees.
Mhm.
Now, one thing that, when we say understand, people want a toxic employee to be simple. They're just an awful person. They're
They're the
just a
villain.
cartoon supervillain. They're
Yeah.
Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. They're just evil incarnate.
Yeah.
But that's rarely ever the case.
People are rarely just one thing, right? Somebody who we would classify as being a toxic employee, that's not the totality of who they are.
Hmm.
And the way that they are behaving is usually stemming from some kind of past series of events or trauma that is informing their behaviors currently.
Right.
And not that we're not saying that this is an excuse and that we suddenly have to accept these toxic behaviors. But what we are trying to, I think that the main point that we want to get across is that it's easier if we classify people as being toxic and discard them.
Yeah. No, you're right. So I remember we had a client years ago, and there was a manager that that left, and everything like that, and their team was one of the most toxic teams. And there was one person on their team that everyone was like, this person is the problem. This person is the cause of all my stress. This person is a toxic employee. And soon after we showed up, that person went on like an extended vacation.
Yeah.
They were gone for a while. It was pre-booked and everything like that.
And everybody was
Um,
warning us.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Careful, when this person comes back. There's evil incarnate. They're out to get they're out to get us and everything like that. And then, so when this person came back, we were kind of like preparing ourselves to deal with this toxic
All
ogre that
right,
was
let's
going to
get ready
be.
for this fight.
Yeah. And when the person came back, they kind of acknowledged that, yeah, things have been hard for them, and they don't have good relationships with their coworkers, and that, by, again, this, and then by kind of like slowly working with us and the rest of the leadership team that we were supporting, and the new movements that we were happening, they were like, you know what, I think that I felt like our manager was pitting us against each other, or that our manager was telling us different things, and I've always felt like I had to defend myself and come out swinging every time we were in a meeting or every time some slight happened that I assumed that it was people were coming after me, so I went after them first because I didn't want to feel like a victim.
Best
And
defense is a strong offense.
yeah. And again, it was over the course of a few months and again, real conversations with people and trying to, again, like putting in things that will help things be more stable and more consistent and documenting pieces and stuff like that. They were just like they realized that, they hadn't been bringing their best, they hadn't had good relationships, and other people kind of realized that a bit about themselves too, and that they were all almost like on attack mode for each other. And some of them had like identified this person and they attributed more to their behavior collectively. I was like, they all chose this is the person that we don't like. And
Yeah.
so there was this case of the person wasn't a cartoon supervillain. They weren't Mr. Burns. They weren't this ogre. They were just in a bad situation, and the way that they've been led, they felt betrayed. So they were kind of in attack mode, just like everyone else was. And then upon fixing those pieces, upon putting more processes into place and
And working one
standardizing
on
things,
one with people and
yeah, and
developing,
creating more
building a
transparency
relationship.
and yeah, and helping the leadership team be more consistent and that people could almost like let their guard down. The team was able to recover from that, and the team ended up working a lot stronger after the fact.
Yeah.
And this person ended up becoming like you're taking on a higher leadership role within the team that used to hate them, and now the team was excited that they were in this higher leadership role. Like they were able to bounce back from what was seen as an absolute never will be able to come back from environment. It is just so toxic.
Yeah. There's a few
So
things that
yeah,
I want to highlight that I think are really important pieces to pull out from your story. One is that the behaviors need to be identified and
yeah,
they need to be identified to the person, right? We need
mhm,
to give people an opportunity to correct the behaviors, right? Identify them, share the concerns with somebody, because a lot of our conversation so far really has focused on what the organization needs to do. How do you identify these things? What do you need to understand about these things? But
right,
we also need to recognize that you can't help people who refuse to help themselves.
yeah,
And the employee, your staff member, your leadership team, whomever is showing these types of toxic behaviors, they have a responsibility to try to resolve these things, right?
mhm,
They have a role to play and a critical role to play. And it's your responsibility as the organization to help them to identify the behaviors, to clarify the expectations of what needs to happen, and then provide supports to them to make sure that they can change those behaviors and reach the clarified expectations. But ultimately, they need to choose to do the work themselves,
mhm,
right? If they don't, well, now we are in a situation of, well, I've identified behaviors, I've identified my expectations, and you've continually refused to change. Now we're in a performance management conversation.
right, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that we found helpful when we go into organizations that are trauma infused, and we're trying to, because people love say, these problems are so complex. How do we deal with this employee or this situation or or this team or this kind of backstabbing or this? And one of the things that we often kind of say is we say this isn't actually that difficult if we take a simple approach of workplace incivility
Mm-hmm.
is a performance issue.
Yep.
And if we have a performance management process, we can resolve all these issues as performance issues.
Yep.
And I think we've actually moved into resolve, but that's really kind of how some of these things can be approached when it is toxic managers, toxic employees, when it's about, like the workplace is creating this, and it's not necessarily like the policies aren't weaponized in a sense and
Yeah.
causing the betrayal, but it's more like it's more people driven. One of the ways that we can resolve that is through processes like making things like workplace incivility, having incivil interactions in your workplace to be dealt with as a performance issue, gives you a process, performance management, for handling these types of infused and toxic environments.
Yeah. It requires having difficult conversations with people, right?
Absolutely.
There is a so in we've now I guess we've fully moved into resolve. So
Yeah.
there's a role for the organization and there's a responsibility for the organization to resolve if this is why it's so important to identify, right? You
Yeah.
can't resolve something that you haven't identified. So if it comes from, well, we have managers who are acting out of self-preservation, which is causing employees to feel that they can't trust and that they're betrayed and that they're pitted against each other. Now it's the organization's responsibility that once you've identified that, to begin to resolve it, to put to clarify the expectations with managers, to put some supports in place to make sure that they understand what they need to be doing, how what they're currently doing is having a negative effect on the performance and outcomes of their team. And then again, we have a responsibility. Once we can't just identify a problem and say, change it.
Hmm.
You can, but you shouldn't. What you should do is identify the problem, help try to work with the individual to identify potential solutions, and then support them with regular check-ins. And maybe it's going to be some skill, maybe it's from a lack of confidence, right? Maybe they don't
Yeah.
feel confident in their role and they need some additional training, right?
Hmm.
Offering that, not making them ask for it, because depending on the culture, if they're acting under self-preservation, they may be scared to ask for help because they feel like they're going to be penalized for it, which again goes back to kind of the counter to psychological safety, right?
Right.
So all of these pieces, we haven't mentioned psychological safety since like the very beginning, but
Hmm.
you cannot have psychological safety when you have active and pervasive toxicity, self-preservation,
Hmm.
institutional betrayal. These things you will never be able to build a psychologically safe environment in until you identify, understand, and resolve them.
Absolutely. No, and it's a good point. You're right. We did kind of not talk about it, but we're building up to this section of
We're
resolve.
getting to it.
Yeah, that really is about it because the key to actually create psychological safety in trauma-infused workplaces, the answer to the question broadly is you have to identify, understand, and resolve the challenges that are causing it, but how you resolve them is through stability, creating stability in the organization to allow for people to feel like their feet are not going to get cut out from underneath them, or that they can stand on facts, they can stand on processes, they can stand on something with secure footing, so they don't feel like at any moment the floor is going to fall beneath them. You need to provide clarity. You need to be clear on what is expected of you. What is the process for this? What are the things that I need to do in order to be successful in my job? You need to create transparency. Make sure that we're not judging you behind the scenes about things you don't know about. We're not evaluating you on stuff that we're never going to tell you about. We're not going to keep rules or resources from you and expect you to figure it out. If you don't ask for it, you don't get it because, it's all about knowing the secret password. But most importantly, the most important way to create psychological safety in trauma-infused workplaces is consistency.
Yeah.
It's about we're going to do this and then we do it. We're going to, this is the rule today. It's also the rule tomorrow. It's also the rule next week. I, as your manager, am going to expect this of you today, tomorrow, and going forward. And that idea of we are consistent in how we treat people, we're consistent in what we expect of people, the rules are consistent, the processes are consistent, the steps are consistent. That is going to be the
Yeah.
fundamental piece. And usually that's where most of the breakdown, most of the institutional betrayal, most of the toxicity, all kind of comes from, is a lack of consistency.
And honestly, one of the first steps that you're going to have to take if you are a manager and this talk is resonating with you and you're identifying, you know what, I've probably been part of the problem, and I want to change that, you're going to have to acknowledge it
Hmm.
with your team. It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. It
Hmm.
honestly, it takes a lot of courage to
Hmm.
stand up in front of, especially staff members who you are responsible for, and say, you know what, I'm sorry. I have messed up. Here are the things that here are the problems that I've identified. Here's how I would like to resolve them and move forward together.
Right.
Acknowledging there is incredible power in acknowledging past wrongs.
Yeah.
And it's not about making excuses and it's
Hmm.
not about glossing over the facts. Let's acknowledge it and move on, right? This has
Yeah.
happened in the past and it wasn't right. So we're going to do something to make sure this doesn't happen in the future.
Yeah.
Acknowledgement is an incredibly powerful relationship rebuilding tool. And this is really, if there is trauma in your workplace, if there's institutional betrayal, toxic stress, or any of the other pieces that we've talked about, you're acknowledging this will build your credibility with your team, with those who are experiencing the effects of it, right?
Well.
But it needs to be acknowledged. And then exactly what you said, Kobe, consistency. If
Hmm.
you say you're going to do something differently, do it, or else you're just contributing to more betrayal.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think what you're again like how I would word or the idea of kind of the acknowledgement is really more about accepting responsibility,
Yes,
right?
that's a good way to frame it.
Yeah, and to me and that is how you start mending fences with institutional betrayal if it's organizational wide. We have, or the organization have potentially been using policies as weapons against employees, based on just like, we had a series of thefts during this year, so we reacted harshly and penalized employees unfairly.
Yeah.
And you know what? We're accepting responsibilities for
Yeah.
our actions, and we're going to learn
Here's
learn from
what
this.
led to our decision. But you know what? The decision that we made actually turned out to be not the right decision. So
Yeah,
now we're going to correct that.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That's a
So
wonderful chain of events to and a message to share.
yeah. And that's the same thing that managers have to do is if they feel like, they have contributed to, bad management practices, or they realize like, what, maybe I wasn't consistent with this person, or I do treat this person better than other people, or so that if they again identify and understand why they are made the decisions that they've made, they can start to resolve the problems. And one of the first steps is going to be accepting responsibility for what they've done.
Yeah.
There is something powerful about somebody that accepts responsibility, wears past mistakes, is upfront about it, transparent about it, and then learns from it and moves
Yeah.
forward with that learning. That is a powerful person. That is a powerful organization. And it's a powerful step to creating psychological safety.
I mean, essentially what we're talking about is how do you rebuild trust first?
Yeah.
And it's really hard to rebuild trust if you don't accept responsibility for past mistakes.
Yeah.
And you're right. The power that and the reputation and the like, if you are authentic about this, I mean, if
Hmm.
it people can see through facades pretty quickly, like but if you are authentic about this
Hmm.
and you as a leader acknowledge that you've made mistakes, that in and of itself is going to set you apart from 95% of the bosses that people have worked for in the past, right? Just acknowledging that you're not perfect
Hmm.
is powerful. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be so uncommon,
Hmm.
but it can be a really powerful way to start to rebuild some of the trust that it's been lost.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the work that you and I do, it's not all the work we do, but a recent portion of the work that you and I do is we go in to chaotic and complex environments, usually that are just like, on the verge of blowing up, and
Yeah.
we try to resolve the, issues in trauma-infused workplaces.
Yeah.
And we do it very successfully, and partially because the secret sauce is stability, clarity, transparency, and consistency. And it's really not harder than that. We create processes and standardize things so there's stability and transparency in how this will be handled.
Yeah.
We provide clarity in what we expect, and we provide, kind of again, we make sure that there's upfront expectations, and then we consistently administer those new
Yeah.
processes, policies, and we own the difficulties and we acknowledge the realities. It's not much more complex than that, but holy cow, did these organizations do a 180 when that stuff is implemented?
Well, when you have the structure, like the structural component is, I really enjoy, obviously. And that's a huge piece of it. But we also need to, like, what a large part of what we do is not just aligning the operational and human capital structures to make sure that they are consistent and aligned and working together to actually achieve the goals. We then have to provide training and mentorship and support to those who are going to be using the new systems,
Hmm.
using the new structures, using the new policies. To how do you actually use this consistently with your team? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Because you giving somebody a brand new shiny tool is good, but if they've never used it before, how are they supposed to use it effectively?
Hmm. Right. Absolutely. Okay. I think this has been a great conversation. I think I'll just jump into a quick summary.
Sure.
But again, before I do, I think it's just great to say this, I'm so excited for season four. I'm excited that, because I feel like this conversation we really touched on strengthening culture and some practical psychology to kind of help again understand these issues and path going forward. I hope you as a listener enjoyed this conversation too. Please share any feedback that you have with us, through the texting thing or send us an email. We always
I'm
love,
really excited to hear people's thoughts on the new branding. Let us
yeah,
know what you
absolutely.
think of the new podcast art, because I think it's fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, so again, thank you very much for if you've been joining us on this journey for the last three seasons, and I really hope you're going to enjoy season four because we're very excited about it. Okay, so the question was, how do you create psychological safety in trauma-infused workplaces? Well, largely, the things you need to do, the steps you need to take are to identify, understand, and resolve. Part of identify is to know where this stuff coming from. And often it's things like institutional betrayal. It's people being triggered by past workplaces where they have been dealing with toxic stress, or they've been dealing with other kind of, mental health related issues that may be bringing to the workplace. Or some of it might be coming from outside of their personal life, and it's just seeping into the workplace. But knowing where the causes are or knowing where they're coming from is a first step towards kind of moving towards resolution. Then we need to understand, what does it look like? What does it mean to people? Where it is, what are the realities that are impacting this? Like if it is toxic employees, we have to understand that just a toxic employee is just, we can't write them off as a terrible person or as a cartoon supervillain, that they are something that, that there may be more complexity to it, and we have to try and understand where these pieces are coming from so we can better understand our resolution. But then we move towards resolving them. It's about providing stability, clarity, consistency, and transparency. We want to be able to make sure that we're building structures and systems and training people that we can handle what are the best practices for the workplace, but how can we consistently apply these
Mhm.
pieces with clarity and transparency going forward? And that's how we can turn around organizations that are currently trauma infused and actually turn them into organizations that are brimming with psychological safety. All right. So that does it for us. For a full archive of the podcast and access to video versions hosted on our YouTube channel, visit roman3.ca/podcast. Thanks for joining us.
For more information on topics like these, don't forget to visit us at roman3.ca. Side effects of this podcast may include improved retention, high productivity, increased market share, employees breaking out in spontaneous dance, dry mouth, aversion to the sound of James's voice, desire to find a better podcast.